Good morning, America. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. We've got an interesting show today talking about your retirement. So, a couple big parts about your retirement: your 401ks and Social Security. So that's going to be that's where most people have their assets. We're going to talk a little bit about diversifying those assets as well. Um, but again, one of the biggest things people do is they take out their 401ks too early and get hit with massive penalties. And that's where people end up owing taxes and having to come to me. I'm also going to talk about how to prepare for Social Security and some of the threats to Social Security, and how your politicians are really hosting that one. So I again just need to get them on the right page where they're actually taking it seriously. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. We've got a lot of news to cover and information. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for watching. We've got a lot of good news today. A lot of interesting news to cover, and we're just going to dive right into it. First article here is going to be from California. So, I spoke about this before, how California politicians decided to not only increase minimum wage for fast food workers to $20, and that normal minimum wage is now $16 an hour in California. But they're picking specific industries and raising that minimum wage up to just a number they pick, I guess. But $20 an hour for fast food, it's causing all kinds of problems in the fast food industry. And also up to increases over the next few years up to $25 an hour for healthcare workers. So healthcare minimum wage has been a big thing. They've been working with the unions. The SEIU is one of the biggest here, trying to get bigger and bigger increases to the minimum wage. The problem is the California government can't afford it. It was supposed to go into effect a month ago. Governor Newsom with the legislature said, we can't do that. We have a huge budget shortfall, almost a $57 billion shortfall. And so they kicked it out for a week. And so this would increase minimum wage for 426,000 healthcare workers. And it's kind of funny and ironic, and I'm laughing about it because they did this without considering the true cost. And businesses freaked out, and the businesses try to say, hey, we can't afford this. And they're only kicking the can down the road when the government can't afford this. And California government is known, has a history of ups and downs, budget surpluses, budget deficits, because they don't plan very well. Again, they don't. It's when they have a little bit of money, they spend it like drunken sailors on all kinds of gimmies and giveaways. And so they're saying, hey, if our revenues go up at least 3% higher, then we can give this to you. We can have it start October 15th. Otherwise, we're kicking the can down the road to January 1st. So if we get a little bit of money, yes, we'll give this to you. The problem is if you get a little bit of money, the first time things turn south again, you're going to be even in a worse position. But again, instead of planning, and this is going to be a big focus of today, is planning for your future and for fiscal sanity. Instead of planning that out, it's just more and more expenses that right now they're saying there's no way they can afford it, and it's just going to continue. So if they put in an increase now, it'll cost the state about $2 billion, which they can't afford. But they do it January 1st, it'll cost them about $600 million for their fiscal year. And then it'll eventually go up to $25 per hour for most healthcare workers. And so it really, I think this is a perfect idea of, when you finally get some money, you go and you spend it as fast as you can. It's like a kid in a candy store. And I did that. I had a paper out when I was in middle school. And guess what I did every time I got some money? I would go play arcades. I would buy candy. I did not understand saving or anything like that, and there's too many politicians today that act like kids and get a little bit of money and just go blow it. Now, this next article is talking about China's excess manufacturing capacity. We've been talking about this for quite some time about China, and again, overall, just the story. I mean, it's a long story, but Chinese authorities, the Chinese communists, still plan their country's economy. They are still forcing the economy to do things that it normally wouldn't under an economic, if you were just letting the economy run like a capitalist society. They have some capitalist features, they do some things, but their communist party still gets involved, still has a great habit of messing things up. The problem is when they mess things up, they also have a huge effect on their neighbors and those around them. So they're overproducing. They went in and they focused on all kinds of production, and then they're producing way more than China can take on, and then the sluggish domestic economy cannot absorb it. The developed West is now resistant to China trade because they're cheaters and they do everything wrong to undercut the West, and the West is finally waking up to it, a little bit late, but it has more capacity in these areas than anyone can use. So what are they doing? They're going to the third world. They're flooding their markets, and they're going to realize very quickly that China is not their friend. So United States, Europe, Japan have all pointed this. The European Union is talking about increasing tariffs on them because China can't sell the cheap EVs in the US. So they're being dumped in the European Union, they're being dumped in South America, they're being dumped in other places, and it's really killing the competition. The problem is, while we can protect our domestic trade, our domestic markets from China overproduction, they're killing our markets in other countries, and that's what's also hurting us. So while you have Europe and Japan standing up to China's productions, you still have a huge portion of the world that is welcoming them. And so here you have steel production is 8% higher than domestic needs. I mean, it's just area after area. China has invested in overproducing manufacturing and production, and as a result, they're taking that and trying to dump it on other economies. So again, this is causing distortion in Chinese markets, but I think he assumes it's just the Chinese government messing up again. And yes, they are messing their own economy and causing huge economic disruptions in their own economy. But I think a lot of this is planned. They want to kill manufacturing in other countries, and by providing oversupply, and they're being supported by all the subsidies from their communist government, it will kill manufacturing in other countries. It's already hurting it in the United States and other countries. And when that manufacturing falls off due to their overproduction, they will be in a great position to move forward once they've really hurt the competition. And that, I think, is the big concern here with China. Now, this is a off-the-wall topic here. AI is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. And we've actually started using it in a very minor way for some email campaigns. We're bringing up and drafting some information that goes out just for informational purposes, etc. But Elon Musk, and he has some ideas that are kind of out there. He's talking about doing eventually AI, artificial intelligence, will bring universal income for all. I don't think that's a great idea. I think that's a horrible idea. If you take a huge portion of the population, and you just make it so all they have to do is entertain themselves. What does that do to self-esteem? What does that do? I mean, again, study after study, when you take away the need to survive, the need to do things, people are very self-destructive when left to their own devices. And it brings about a whole host of societal ills. Um, so again, he's saying, look, we get enough AI where they, self-driving vehicles, computer machines that replace humans in work settings and do all physical and mental labor, which again, there's going to be a lot of trades. There's going to be a lot of issues like that that can't be taken over by AI anytime soon. And I think to do it, it would be silly to have them to completely rely on AI. But the more expensive, the more we make it harder to employ workers, driving up minimum wages, the more attractive AI and robots and the workplace will be. And we see this in the fast food industry. They jacked up the minimum wage for fast food companies, and guess what they're doing? Kiosks. They're doing burger flipping machines and robots, and the larger companies that can afford to automate are the ones doing that, whereas your smaller companies are the ones that are hurting and they can't afford to do that. So they're either closing down or letting workers go and just trying to get by on a shoestring. So again, it's not good news where we're going. I mean, they kind of have this rosy idea. Most likely income is one of abundance, goods and services available to anyone. Problem is, if you just put out a universal basic income, what does that do to inflation? If the government's just giving people money, it just drives inflation. And again, it can be very destructive to people, especially men, that feel like they have one of their large purposes is providing for their families. So we're seeing that's already been seen a lot. The war on poverty has destroyed families more than everything else. So again, I'm not as keen on AI as some people, and I think it can cause a lot more problems than good. So want to jump to this next article. This is from Politico. We're coming up on a break, so we don't have a lot of time. But it's basically that corporations are facing, again, the Democrats want to get rid of the Trump tax cuts and increase, put it back to 35% from, or 21%. So put it back, back to 35% corporate tax rate, which is higher than most of the world. And we're actually running out of time. So we're gonna continue this and then move on to our main topic after the break. And that's coming up in just a few seconds. So some good information and what to expect and how things can change depending on what policies are enacted. Welcome back, everybody. And we were just talking about the article about the increase in the corporate taxes. Again, the committee would increase or a whopping 14 percentage point cut, depending on if the glass is half full, half or half empty, depending on how you look at it. The real concern is that this is more and more, even Republicans are looking at this as a way to cover up the huge hit to the budget for keeping the Trump tax cuts in place. I think that's a misnomer. Politico is definitely a left-leaning site. When you cut taxes, doesn't mean your overall income goes down. It went up when the tax cuts were put in place. So federal revenues are higher than ever with the Trump tax cuts in place. And by raising, and increasing taxes across the board, very well could just decrease federal revenues as people can't afford to do more. The more the government just takes, the less people can actually spend and fund the economy. So it's a zero-sum thinking where, again, you can't grow the economy with tax cuts, or as more people get more money, that money flows through the economy much better than government spending. That's by its definition, or it's essentially wasteful and ineffective. So you have business lobbyists blitzing Congress already, trying to make their case for keeping this low tax cut plan in place for corporations, or this low tax rate. And while you had a much higher Republican support, there's plenty of people like Chip Roy pictured here that is saying, hey, let's give the tax breaks to the small businesses and your average person, and he's fine with higher taxes on corporations. Rightly or wrongly, I do think we need to be competitive globally, but again, this is why we get to hash out ideas and discuss and see what works best for our country as we try different things, and that's called politics. So next article is a little bit of a concern here. And this is where this is from CNBC, this is where people get burned. This is where the average individuals lose money and get burned in the stock market and other investments. They're saying, look, we haven't had a 2% sell-off since the financial crisis. And they're just looking at it and saying, hey, it happens sometimes when we'll have a large period here with growth, and then boom, it always goes up, and then it's like how many days at work can we go without an accident? Right now we're hitting a very long stretch as far as the number of days without a correction in the market. So here's the key thing. When you have a correction in the market will go back up. Make sure your investments are solid, but when things crash, that's the worst time to sell. It's even with cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, everybody sold when it crashed. They couldn't pay their bills. The problem is too many people were relying on that. And when Bitcoin had a huge crash, people that were relying on that to pay their normal bills couldn't. And so they weren't diversified. They didn't have a plan in place. And they ended up selling after Bitcoin crashed and getting what money they could out of it. Now Bitcoin's back up. Now it's a bad example because it's not tied to actual economic growth. It's very speculative. But the overall market, they're expecting a 2% drop. They're saying, okay, we're overdue for something like that. And so when it happens, just prepare. Know that it comes and goes. Don't freak out. Don't sell good assets. Talk to your financial planner and plan for eventualities like this. So this next article is also from CNBC. I saw this when I was connected. Talking about phantom debt. And this is a problem in our country that's not being talked about. So I want to share this video after the commercial. But again, this is another big problem. that's happening out there that people just aren't talking about. So here we go.
You've probably seen the option at checkout to split a purchase into separate interest-free installments.
Buy now, pay later is just a way of spreading out the cost of a purchase over a few installments. Usually it's 4 at 0%, so it's pretty attractive for a lot of people.
The number of buy now, pay later loans increased nearly 1,100% between 2019 and 2021. That rapid growth has some analysts concerned because where there are loans, there's debt. But exactly how much debt is still unclear.
We've often referred to this as phantom debt, where it's sort of flying under the radar, not really something that anybody has a good grasp on.
Our back-of-the-envelope estimates put the BNPL market at somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 billion. So you're talking comfortably a third of the transaction increase in credit card volume.
That could imply that households are more in debt than we even know, because we're not really measuring this booming space of buy now, pay later. I think you could be missing or misrepresenting how healthy the consumer is. The notion of this phantom debt being out there is just not true. We know from publicly reported information how many folks are taking out loans and how many of them default. It's a very, very low number.
Buy now, pay later users are more financially vulnerable. It's those users who are using buy now, pay later more frequently for household goods, for essentials. So that type of user and that type of pattern is the big concern.
Here's why phantom debt is looming over U.S. consumers and the economy.
It was first called phantom debt in this Wells Fargo report that called attention to the fact that there is no hard measure of how many buy now, pay later loans are out there, how consumers are doing with these loans, whether they're really keeping up with their payments or falling behind.
Not having a clear read of underlying debt burdens in general, particularly for the household sector, can be a concern, because you could be assessing the health of the household sector and looking at debt-to-income ratios, net worth being higher across the income spectrum, income growth, all of these variables that suggest the household sector and consumer in general are actually doing fairly well despite elevated inflation and challenges in the broader economy. But if you're missing a piece of that puzzle, right, if you're looking at all of household debt and thinking it's all household debt, but there's this other component that's lurking in the background of this phantom debt buy now, pay later segment, I think you could be missing or misrepresenting how healthy the consumer is.
Okay. If you haven't actually taken out one of these loans, and I think many people haven't, I was not aware of how commonplace these are. Through Venmo, through Amazon, Walmart now, you walk out and it will give you an option of just paying later or paying in installments, and it's 0% as long as you pay in 4 installments. This has become a rising issue out there, and a lot of people are taking advantage of this. 0% interest. Why not? Because the scary thing is that you're not purchasing a vehicle that you're going to be using for hopefully 5 to 10 years. You're not purchasing a home that you'll be living in and gains equity in it long term. You're using it to purchase things that, again, if you're using future income to pay for something that you're going to need and consume now, like groceries. By its nature, groceries don't last. That means in the future, you're going to have less and less income to buy necessities like groceries, especially if you're not just buying groceries, you're buying other things, like TVs, computers, whatever, clothes that don't bring you value. So, and I'm talking about long-term value. So, buying on credit, this is not a new concept, but again, it's been used in the past where, through different stores you might have credit, but if you're always putting stuff on a tab and then you have to pay this, and the idea that people are going to Walmart and doing this on a regular basis, or Amazon, or there's plenty of places where they're doing this. And like I said, it's affecting the poorest out there. And who are struggling right now? Retirees and middle to lower income families. So again, it's just something I saw. I've been seeing this happen, and it's just in the last couple of years, it's been a newer phenomenon. And the rate that people are using it these has increased 1,100%. So we're doing the same thing our federal government is doing in many ways, where people are going further into debt. So, just these quick microloans here are being used, 11 times more than they were in 2019. So the use of these has really exploded exponentially as people struggle through COVID and people are struggling in today's economy. So that's why consumer spending is still up. But again, we're borrowing now against our future. The next article I'm going to share is all about how our federal government is doing this. So again, this is an article from the Federalist. Let me go ahead and get that share out. Now, this talks about how we are, when people talk about entitlement spending, this is what it is: Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And it's a little gruesome. They're cannibalizing the entire federal budget, but this just came out this morning. It's a quick read, but again, when it talks about the issues here, and people get defensive about this. This is such a supercharged emotional thing. People are like, look, those aren't entitlements. I paid for them throughout my life. More accurately, you've been taxed on them. And the trust that people put in the federal government over the last 70 years, well, actually, since FDR, so adding a couple more decades to that, probably 90 years, has been misplaced. Did it work well in the beginning? Yes. You had plenty of workers to pay for people. Again, life expectancies were much shorter. But now we're getting into situations where we have fewer workers, more retirees. Our birth rate has gone down. And we have people coming to the country using Medicare and even Social Security to some extent that haven't paid into the system, haven't been taxed on it. And it's one of those things, if you would have taken that same money, invested in the economy, you'd be light years better off. So again, this idea that government's going to come and fix your retirement for you and yet you can rely on them in retirement is mind-boggling. So it talks about spending increased. It was revised. We talked about that recently. It went up to about $1.9 trillion. Supposed to be about 1.3. Now it's jumped up to about $1.9 trillion deficit and almost $2 trillion. And that's going to continue. So when you have these deficits, it drives the debt up further. And again, just looking at the numbers, it's so crazy. I'm going to jump ahead and then jump back real quick. So they cite this latest budget report that just came out, and that's just something a lot of people have been going to and discussing. So here's some of the hard numbers, and these are the official government numbers. So are they all correct? No, but fairly accurate overall. So in 2023, overall revenues were $4.4 trillion. 24 for fiscal year 24, that's ending in September, $4.89 trillion. So it's a big increase. And then for 25, it's expected to go over $5 trillion in income. Does that sound good? Well, let's look at the spending. Here, 6.123, 6.880. I don't know why they think 2025 is going to kind of level off in spending. But again, it doesn't matter if we bring in $5 trillion, if our federal revenue increases by $600 billion, but then we spend $800 billion more, we're just digging ourselves a bigger hole. And so when they stretch it out, conservative numbers by 2034, they say, okay, 7.45. They tend to guess out 10 years. But if you have $7.5 trillion in income, but then you're spending almost $10.5 trillion every year, you have yearly deficits of 10 to 3 trillion every single year. And so again, 2.86 trillion deficits. And so here you can see for 2023, deficit just went up for 2024. And I don't believe these numbers for 2025. One, because Congress still keeps passing bills and increasing the expenses. So when they talk about Medicare, Social Security, out of this, we're going to focus on 2024 because it's the most recent year. Where are most of the spendings going? So mandatory entitlement spending is just what it's called. But people, it's what you're entitled to from the federal government. So these are obligations that are mandatory to the federal government. 4.19 trillion out of 4.89 trillion is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, other giveaways to, not giveaways, but healthcare benefits, Social Security, etc. And it really adds up. Our total revenue is 4.89. So this isn't paying for the federal government. This is not paying for the total defense budget, which was for this year, for 24, 849. Now, interest is more than the federal budget or the defense spending now. And that's the problem, is our interest rate is going to go up and up and up the more we pile onto the federal government. For 2025, it's expected to be more than $1 trillion. And that's one of the reasons that we're running such high deficits. So just to kind of put things in context, if we're taking and spending $4 trillion of a $4.9 trillion budget, that doesn't leave a lot left over for defense. Doesn't leave a lot over for interest. I mean, those two things alone. And I think they've kind of simplified this, but again, this is the federal, straight from the CBO. It doesn't include paying for the federal government and keeping the administrative state running and enforcement and all that. It's just, I think that's the non-defense spending here of $948 billion. That should be the rest of the government. So jumping back to the original article here, we're spending at the wrong time. So we have deficit spending. Back in Ronald Reagan's age, we had deficit spending equaling 7% of GDP. A lot of the left claimed we had to raise taxes. And why didn't we through Ronald Reagan's era? It's because we had huge economic increases. With favorable tax policies and getting rid of regulation and red tape, the economy took off. It exploded. And continue to do so. But right now, interest rates rising, interest costs continue to rise as a percentage, overall percentage of the economy. That's the worst time to spend. So during Reagan's time, you had very, very high inflation coming from the Carter years. And as the government got things under control, inflation actually went down and the economy took off. Here, we're spending more than ever, personally and through the government, and inflation and the cost of money is going up. So this is not the time to be spending. It's the time to get our fiscal house in order to address inflation. And we're going to come right back. We have another break in just a couple seconds here and continue the conversation. Welcome back, everybody. So, I didn't even think it would have that unsustainable trends. Absolutely where we're going here. And it really, this is an interesting little line here. It's impolitic of both parties to recognize the obvious truth. But where are these unsustainable spending lines coming from? So outlays for Social Security Medicare account for more than half of the 3.4 trillion increase in spending. And this is looking at the projections from 2024 out to 2034. And again, the increased cost of healthcare is going up. The Obamacare did very little to address actual costs of healthcare, just greatly increased the demand for it, where if you understand market numbers, it just doesn't make any sense. And this is very interesting. It doesn't matter, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, they can't balance the budget or get in any kind of sense of fiscal responsibility without addressing the biggest part of it, which is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But what happens when anytime anybody suggests doing anything with those programs? They lose their flipping mind. The last person to suggest anything close to that was President Bush. He suggested using the market to privatize some aspects of Social Security if people wanted to, or people could invest. Instead of giving the money directly to the government, they could put it directly in retirement accounts that could be put into the market. And guess what the rich do? They don't rely on Social Security. They rely on the markets. They get diversified throughout the market. And if you invested back under George W. Bush and took what you've been giving to Social Security, and if you were investing it this whole time, you would be in a pretty good position. But again, that's not what we don't want to talk facts, and this is where they say they're cannibalizing the entire federal budget because they're so big and they're growing. So again, this article, they really are pushing that we need to be more fiscally responsible. We need to be, forget the politics of it. Forget, we need to stop scaring people. Oh, he's going to touch your Social Security, Medicare. You're going to face a 20% cut in just a few years if they don't get their act together. And as far as Medicare and Obamacare subsidies, a lot of people felt that this was a huge plan, that it wasn't accidental, that healthcare costs would go up and up and up. Instead of actually solving issues for people, it's a temporary band-aid to get more and more people to rely on the government, but to force everybody onto a single-payer system like Canada. And there's a reason people from Canada come down here for health treatment from Europe. It's not pretty. Quality goes down. I can imagine people, just look at the VA system. And as a veteran that does use VA care when I have to, it's not pretty. There are some bright spots, but overall, government is horrible about actually taking care of people. They're not responsive, and there's nobody really to complain to. Whereas at least you have some recourse if it's a private healthcare. You can actually have something done about it. You can get someone you can try to get someone to listen to you. If not, you can go elsewhere. So this next big article, again, focusing on your retirement plan distributions. Social Security, Medicare has to be reformed. And that is going to affect people in retirement. One of the big things here, and this is what hurts people. And I was just talking to, I told one of my kids, look, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And they just looked at me like I was stupid and said, huh? One of the biggest problems I see with people is when they're taking money out of their retirement accounts And sometimes it's for emergencies. Sometimes it's something where you absolutely need this cash now, but it is hurting your future. And there are times I tell people, hey, if you owe the IRS, you can either just give all the money to the IRS, or you can use it to repair your home. You can pay down medical bills. You can use it. There are times where it makes sense to use that, but really then you have to turn around and save even more for your retirement. And it's tough. So this is an article straight directly from irs.gov. I think it's a very helpful article, and it talks about how to avoid all the nasty penalties and interest when you take chunks of money out of your retirement. And it's rarely a good idea to do that. The main reason is it takes your adjusted gross income for that year, drastically increases it, so you're increasing your taxes overall. And if you don't have enough withholdings for that, for what you take out, then you have to call someone like me and deal with it, which is not cheap, and you have penalties, and it's just a mess. So plan for these things when you have 401ks, when you have investments like this. Just treat it like you're just putting the money away. It's out of mind, out of sight. You're not going to touch it. But these emergency personal exemptions help you avoid the 10%, but you need to talk to someone to plan this through. Don't just take the money, because that's when people get burned. That's when people get taxed at the worst rates possible. So talk to a CPA. Make sure you qualify before you take the money. There's plenty of people that if they did things a certain way, or they planned it out, if you're close to the end of the year, you can take half of it one year and half of the next, and then lower that overall tax hit between 2 years. There's so many different ways to do this, but also do it in a way that you're not going to get killed on taxes. So if you have emergencies, an unforeseeable, immediate financial need, you can access it. But you have to make sure you qualify for it. So this is for not only 401k plans, 403 annuity plans, 403b plans, government section 457 if you have government investments, and or IRAs. They're all eligible to permit emergency personal expense distributions. If someone gets sick, you're about to lose your home, there are ways to access this in emergencies. If you can plan to avoid that, that's even better. But there are limitations on the dollar amount and frequency of accessing your 401k. So that's the problem. When you get a tax benefit, all of a sudden you are not in the driver's seat. You can't just make whatever decision you want with your retirement without consequences. And they can be pretty severe. Provides that individuals receiving emergency personal expense are permitted to repay these distributions and keep your plan going. So if you do have anything like this, first of all, you should be setting up an emergency fund. You should be paying down credit card debt. You should have a cushion so when something comes along, you're not flat on your face. But sometimes life happens. And this is one thing that I want to definitely focus on: victims of domestic abuse. So if you do have access to a 401k and you have an emergency situation, talk to your CPA, talk to your tax preparer. If you don't have one, give us a call and we'll put you in. We'll connect you with one. Pretty much anywhere across the country. That's call us at 520-485-7371. I worked as a prosecutor straight out of law school, and so this hits home because I've seen this. One of the toughest things for women, and this is mostly women, going through domestic abuse, is that they don't know where to go, where to turn. They don't have access to, they're often not the primary breadwinner. And so it's hard to have the funds to enable someone to leave an abusive situation. So again, there's a definition for domestic abuse victims, or the definition of domestic abuse that qualifies for this means that you can access your IRA and certain retirement plans as long as it's not subject to spousal consent requirements. So again, there's dollar limitations, and make sure you follow this so you don't get hit with a massive tax penalty if you do need those funds, if you're in this situation. So again, talk to your CPA, talk to your tax preparer, make sure that this is going to help you. And it provides not only guidance on how to make sure your plan, your distribution is eligible to avoid the 10% penalty, but again, talks about personal expense distributions, and there are plenty of other emergencies. I've had people come to me and said, "Look, we have to deal with this hit. We pulled money out of our 401k. Someone in our family got sick." And they said, "Look, we would pull it out in a heartbeat. Again, if someone needed it, well, we would pull that out." The problem is when you do that, again, you can give and you can help out people. And I'm not saying be selfish. It is, a very honorable thing to be willing to help out and people in need, especially in your family. But at the same time, you've got to prepare for yourself. When you are in a good financial position, you can help so much more. And if you empty out your 401k, all of a sudden now you're reliant on your children, which, again, not a bad thing. I think we should go back to that more, where children and family support the elderly. And but it can be a burden. It can be a very difficult thing. I have a family member right now, my wife's grandfather, that is currently in hospice care, and her grandmother that was just her great-grandmother was just diagnosed with terminal cancer. So again, it's whether or not you have the funds to provide for yourself. It can be a huge relief on your family. And this is all, it's not just about just giving them an inheritance, which usually gets misspent, but preparing financially for your own happiness, for your own comfort. And when you are taken care of financially, you can reach out and help others and have the wherewithal to do so. So again, this is all about putting your own financial house in order, avoiding those tax debts, avoiding the interest, and even borrowing like these microloans. All that does is erode your future buying power and your ability to pay for your needs moving forward. So again, if you have questions, if you have needs, reach out to a financial planner, reach out to people that can help you improve your situation. And that's one of our biggest goals here at Guardian Tax Law, is helping people not only get rid of tax debt. That's the majority of what we do, but get ahead on not only paying taxes, but when you have questions about IRAs, when you have questions about dealing with loans and other things that are really holding your financial house hostage, we can help put you in good financial hands so you get prepared. You can pay down these debts. You can prepare for the future and understand where the government is going. And again, people talk about entitlements. Be prepared for the eventuality that you're going to get a lot less in Social Security. And again, they're talking now about a 20% cut across the board. It might be more severe due to the absolute explosion in costs for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And a big part of that is we're not reining in those expenses, but making them available to all kinds of people coming into the country, for better or for worse. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but again, that's going to be an additional burden as more people made eligible for healthcare subsidies through the exchanges through Obamacare, and that's going to be put even a greater weight on this. So we can watch these numbers. They're going to get revised, but as you prepare now, plan now, you should be sitting down, planning with your family, planning out how you're going to get through retirement, and it might be that you sell your home and move in with family. That is becoming more common, and that's fine. Hopefully you can move in with family and then go travel, do what you want, and reduce your costs. And that's what my mom does. And again, she loves to travel. She's all over the country. She's hardly ever home. Her home is with my brother in Idaho. But she has the money that she needs. She can go do what she wants and feel comfortable in retirement. And know that she has her family around her to help buoy her up and support her. So again, if even if you're not retirement age, now is the time to prepare. If you have someone that's preparing and or almost to retirement age, we should be sitting down. You should be talking to an estate planner, to some tax planners, and making sure your fiscal house is in order for your long-term benefit. And again, our goal is not only to make taxes, but finances easy for you and make them easy to understand through this show. So have a great day, and we will see everybody tomorrow.